Good morning and welcome to another edition of BC Poly Hot Stove Social Distancing Edition. I am Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca, joining you live from Orca World Headquarters, otherwise known as my dining room table in Victoria. And joining me live via Skype.
Yes, safely across the Salish Sea. It is I, Jordan Bateman, VP Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. And Maclean, I got to tell you, this has been the most depressing week of phone calls I've had since joining ICBA. For 12 years, really since the '08 recession, I'm not sure a construction company has had to lay off employees. So we're starting to field calls from members saying work is shut down. I have no idea even how to, how do I lay off an employee? How do we put them on EI? Things are getting rough out there for sure.
They are, and obviously the construction sector's feeling it. My wife works at a place that's completely shut down.
The Georgia Strait laid off their editorial staff.
I saw a tweet from Travis Lupick, who's one of the reporters, saying he'd been locked out of his Georgia Strait email account.
Yeah,
I mean that's hard.
Yeah, it's tough times, and 1 million Canadians in the past week or two have filed for EI, and there's probably another million more to come. Maybe you just wonder, when does it when do we hit bottom? Do we hit bottom, and how long can we kind of all get on here?
What does bottom look like? And that's why you're seeing some people probably more out of frustration than thinking it all the way through. We are dealing with a pandemic and probably don't have a lot of choice, but some people saying things like, I think it was the Times columnist editorial today saying, is the cure worse than the disease? I don't think it is,
no.
But you can see where the frustration, where it kind of bubbles up for some people. And I think it hits, well, you and I were just talking about this before we went on, started recording. It hits every household and every individual at a different time.
Yeah. So, we're on day 10 kind of in our family. There's 5 of us here, kids aged 10 to 16. And, it'd been fine until now. It was weird, right? We've had more family dinners than we did in the first 2 months of this year because no hockey interfering, no sports interfering, no student council interfering. We kind of got viral about this actually on the Orca COVID-19 blog today. And then yesterday, and you'd have kind of down moments for individuals in the house, but you sort of work through each of them. Yesterday, though, all of us were just like, this is enough. Like, when's this ever going to end? And the most shocking thing of all, Maclean, my wife, who is like the nicest human on earth, but loathes Donald Trump. We're out for a walk and she's like, I can kind of see where Trump is coming from with this idea of Easter. We need to have some sort of hope. And she's like, even if I don't believe it's ever going to happen, or, maybe it's not so bad to have a date in mind. Like, oh, wow, that's how grim it is. So one day at a time. This morning we all woke up after a good sleep and we seem to have bounced back and are ready to go on. But man, I can only imagine this is a conversation happening over and over again in every home across British Columbia.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, and to your wife's point, I mean, having just a date to look forward to, even if you know that it's probably not going to happen, but I'm like that myself. I'm very much I need to know what the next goalpost is. When I've done the drive between Tsawwassen and my family's place in Calgary more times than I can count, and you never think of it as 1,000 kilometers. You think of it as, okay, get to Golden, get to Revelstoke. Get to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
And I can't, just thinking this is an openended, we're going to be here indefinitely is hard. It's hard to swallow at times.
Yeah, I know for sure. So, we, everyone's workplace is kind of adapting. For those of us fortunate to still have workplaces, we've been doing, we have the ICBA cafe every morning, 9:15 on Microsoft Teams. And it's just like drop in and talk about random stuff for 15 minutes, like non-work stuff. So we talked about McMillions, and we talk about what shows we're binging, and, whose cat is driving them crazy and whose kid is, getting detention because they're not doing their homeschooling. So it's been, that's been positive. So, you do wonder, 2:00 today, I have a meeting for ICBA. We have an offer in on, or we've purchased a floor plate in a new building. It's going to be under construction in Surrey, near Surrey Memorial Hospital. And today is our first meeting to discuss office specs, office needs, design issues. And you're like, will we have an office? Is an office a thing anymore? What's going to happen? Right? So you're like, no, you got to have hope. It's a year and a half away. surely we'll be back in our offices by then. But Maclean, you've been watching wow, like that was some kind of legislative session. Like talk about surreal.
Man, I wish I could have been there.
12 MLAs spaced out,
Yeah.
and 5 or 6 reporters in the press got like it was just bizarre to watch it on Hansard.
It was so surreal, and just little things like watching question period, which was kind of the most normal part of the whole day because it is somewhat routine, and it's just there's no one in there. They get up and they ask a very straightforward, respectful question, and they get a very straightforward, respectful answer, and it's just in a way, and I know how weird this is going to sound if you not somebody who watches the legislature every day. In a way, it was almost more jarring to watch that. There was a small part of me that almost wanted some partisan sniping.
Give us something.
Just something to feel familiar. But no, it was, I mean, I'm glad they didn't do that, to be totally clear. But it added to the level of surrealness. Again, I wish I could have been there in person to see it, but, it's best that as many of us stay home as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, look, Vancouver Sun columnist Vaughn Palmer said he didn't go because he is, as he quoted, an old coot, which proves that he is not publishing fake news. That is 100% confirmed. But, it was just, it was odd to watch as the phone goes off in the background here. Apologies. This is the new world. It's just weird to watch, like, Jazz Johal and Mike DeYoung, who are as, pointed questioners as you're going to have in any legislature in Canada. And, the questions were, what's the curve? Where's this headed? Are we doing enough? And it was very odd. Again, I'm just amazed at Carol James. Like, I would have her in bubble wrap and at home, and I know she's got work to do, but every time I see her, my heart just like jumps a little bit. Like, it's that feeling you get for any any person in your life you think you might be at a bit of risk, right? So
I mean, we talked about this last week. I think she, just by virtue of being the finance minister, had to be there, but you're right, to your point. I mean, it's scary. It's scary right now.
Yeah, it is. So all these things are kind of unfolding. From a business point of view, an employer point of view, I'm not terribly enthused with the measures we've seen so far. They sound great. Trudeau, $55 billion in aid to business. The NDP, Oregon NDP, $2.2 billion or so to business. But they aren't really help for business. They're almost all of it is deferred taxes.
Yeah.
Just punting the tax burden down the road to, I think it's August right now. But like, if you don't have employers solvent or making money or, employing people, you're not going to get any of those taxes in August. And you kind of wonder, like, deferrals are great. There's an old proverb, literally a proverb. It's in the book of Proverbs. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Taxes deferred is going to make business sick. Like, you got to do a little bit more than that now. Just punting tax bills down the road isn't going to help any business. Now, maybe the plan is to keep punting them down the road. Maybe it's to eventually forgive. But that kind of thing needs to be communicated earlier. But right now, the only major tax cut for business is a small 10% subsidy for workers up to $25,000 per business, which it's $25,000, but in the grand scheme of things isn't a huge amount for businesses losing money. And, forgiving the school taxes on businesses that own or rent commercial property. But, that's maybe, I think she said $4,000 per business.
Yeah.
Again, less than $30,000 of relief for businesses that are carrying huge problems right now. And you wonder why businesses are trying everything they can to stay open and stay in business. Well, that's why, they're not getting the kind of help they need.
Well, and I mean, not that we would want anyone to get fired over this, but businesses have been told not to fire anyone. They are laying people off, which is sad. But again, if you've got no revenue coming in, man, it's an impossible situation. It's not. You're right. I think that we need somebody, and this hasn't happened yet because it's all happening this week. But to sort of go through with a fine-tooth comb what exactly both the provincial and the federal government are doing, what kind of overlap there's been, if any. I'm not suggesting there is any. The one thing that we have noticed is that at the very least, we can say that the delivery and the rollout process in BC has been a little smoother than that in Ottawa, where there was some tensions and I guess some overnight compromise.
Yeah. So Trudeau inexplicably comes in with a plan, a piece of legislation that essentially gives Bill Morneau 21 months of free powers to tax and spend. This in a minority government in a crisis. Like,
Yeah.
okay, 30 days, okay, maybe 90 days, all right, maybe 21 months? Like, come on. And essentially wanted to strip Parliament of all of its oversight powers. That's not how it works. I'm sorry, you've got to have that kind of oversight, even if it's softballs like Jazz Joe Hall and Mike Young were serving up to the health minister. You have to have that kind of oversight, and especially in a minority government situation. So sounds like they've worked it out. Relief is getting out there, but look, their EI provisions aren't online till April. The province is matching some EI payouts, but it's tied to the federal system, and again, not ready till April. Meanwhile, I keep reading Ken Busenkool's running around talking about his basic crisis income, that would be a better way. Just deposit $2,000 into every taxpayer's account, CRA account across the country. That would certainly cut down the paperwork, cut down the red tape. You could always tax it back for people making, for millionaires, people who, survive this better than others. But that seems to me the better way to go. But now we're kind of getting into these layers on top of layers of government programs, which will be harder to unspool, harder to administer, and slower to get money into people's hands. I know in about 2 hours, we're taking this at 11:15 on Wednesday. I guess in a couple hours, Spencer Chandler Herbert and Selena Robinson will come out with the Horgan government's rental plan. Little worried that I hear almost no mention of the word mortgage in any of these public comments made by NDP MLAs. Like, guys, it's great to forgive people's rent for a month. The problem is there are a lot of families who have a mortgage that depends on the renter paying downstairs for that. That's like true. How are you going to help those mortgage holders? So hopefully they've thought about that, and we'll have something for mortgage holders. Just because you own a property doesn't make you wealthy or evil. It makes you, and if you're laid off, you certainly need that help. And so I'm curious what that will be. Whatever it is, I'm not sure they could ever please the tenant union or whatever it's called. They've it is amazing to see the tenants union tout Doug Ford ahead of John Horgan as the beacon of hope for renters.
If you needed a sign of that we are in truly strange days. And just to back up very quickly on your point about Ken Bosenkool's idea, which when I first read it, I thought no, but now that I've had some time to digest it, I actually think there's a lot more merit to it than I originally thought. And one of the reasons, I think the key reason is what you touched on, is the fact that it can be done quickly and with very little oversight and red tape. And yes, if you are worried about inequality and millionaires benefiting from it, we can tax it back later. But what needs to happen is action very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And Ken Bosenkool's idea, it at the very least seems simpler, and we can fix it later. But we keep saying in terms of pandemic response that sometimes speed is actually more important than getting all the details right, as silly as that sounds. But these are not normal times, and moving right away is probably more crucial than getting all the details exactly right and waiting too long. And Bosenkool's idea, I think, has the potential, or something like it, to accomplish that.
Yeah, the problem is once we start these other programs and that money starts flowing out, it'll become too expensive to double back and do this. But, hopefully government's taking a second thought of this and taking a look at the possibilities. Denmark, this is kind of built on the Danish model, which we in BC are familiar with only through the work of Shane Woodford, the former NL broadcaster who now
BC Poly HOTSTOVE favorite.
Yeah, it's Shane Woodford. That's really is our point of reference. I hope I would like to see it go that route. It's funny because Ontario has shut down all businesses, but you see the list of exemptions, and it's not really a complete shutdown. I mean, construction's still going on. The liquor store, the cannabis stores are still open. It's not a full-on shutdown. Quebec, a little bit more, but even them, construction's going on in Quebec. BC is interesting. Like, YVR is among the very first kind of major contract deliverers or project owners to shut down, and they've shut down giant contracts, construction contracts there, which is going to cause the layoffs of hundreds of workers. That's an interesting example from what is a federally regulated authority. You wonder if they may need to if government may nudge them to kind of rethink that. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the provincial government, I can tell you, is moving ahead with tenders. let's keep people working. We want to keep people working, building stuff. Let's get some tenders out there. So it is just interesting to see the different kind of points of views of these different governments.
It is, and well, I mean, it's a grim thing to talk about now, but a year, 5 years, 10 years from now, we'll be looking back at which jurisdictions handled this well and which ones didn't. And I suspect partisan lines will be almost irrelevant. There'll be some well-organized governments on both sides. And I'm talking internationally, not just in Canada.
Well, I mean, Prime Minister Doug Ford will be, kicking back with President Mario Cuomo talking about these crazy times, right? Or Andrew Cuomo, man. Or whichever Cuomo was in charge of New York.
I think it is Andrew.
Andrew. I think Mario's
I make that
mistake
all the time too.
I think Mario's the dad. Yeah. So they'll be kicking back, talking about how their brilliant handling of COVID-19 led to them seizing power in both countries, winning power. So.
Well, and the other one that is sort of alarming that no one's paying much attention to, because obviously Italy, Spain, Sweden is ignoring this completely. They're just sort of acting like nothing has changed, and it's just everything is open. All the businesses are going to stay open, and it's
where are Elias Pettersson and Jacob Markstrom? Let's keep them here. Do not let them go home to Sweden.
Absolutely not.
We cannot risk this. This is terrible. Well, hey, speaking of Orca contributors, has Bob gotten out of Mexico? Bob Price?
I believe he's booked now. He has made arrangements for later this week.
Or Bob.
He's. I mean, I don't want to share too many of Bob's personal details. I'm not sure how much he's put out there, but he's stuck in Mexico, and I don't.
He's ripping airlines on Twitter. So I feel
okay. Fair enough. It's hard to remember what he has emailed me and then what's public. Yes. But I do know that he has made arrangements to get back at some personal expense, and that he's not too happy about it.
Yeah. Bob, Bob does our business beat every morning, writes
and does a great job.
Pieces about BC Beyond Hope, which
I'd have to rename that.
Yeah, we may all be beyond hope. But he's been trying to get home from a long planned sojourn in Mexico for weeks. He's been trying to get home and just kept falling through. So it'll be nice to have him back in Kamloops, isolating on threat of $10,000 fine now, according to Trudeau. So the quarantine is
$10,000.
Yes. So we'll have to make sure that some Kamloops folks make sure that Bob's got some food in the house ready for him to return. But these kind of stories, it's crazy. It's the word unprecedented times. I think we use that a lot because it's less scary than holy shit. Like, oh my God. Like we use that word unprecedented a lot in all the media coverage, and it is, like, I don't know. It's like the whole rhythm of life has changed, right? Like around 2:15, I start to get fidgety, like, oh, I got to wrap up my emails and stuff. Got to be ready for Dr. Bonnie at 3. And, you finish everything, wind down as best you can so you can go and spend an hour listening to Dr. Bonnie reassure you that, we're not going to hell in a handbasket here.
I'll be honest. I have a hard time listening to those sometimes. It's just the fact this is no comment on Dr. Henry or any of people involved. It's a daily sort of drumbeat of knowing there's more cases, and I, for one, find it kind of depressing. Yeah. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't watch for any moment, but I'm one of those people that finds it quite hard to stomach on a day after day after day basis.
Yeah, well, social media does help. Hey, but do you know what, Jody? Have you seen the numbers on Jody's piece on Dr. Bonnie? It's like the most read piece in Orca history.
My good. Well, I did know that, but she's articulating what a lot of people are feeling. Yeah, she's articulating what a lot of people are feeling. It feels good to have somebody as, well, first of all, competent and professional, but also, there's something to be said for Dr. Henry's bedside manner as well, right? Like she could be this competent, but also be like Dr. House, right?
Yes.
And kind of a jerk about it. But she's not. She's very sort of like reassuring and calming.
That's what I learned from Dr. House. It's not lupus. It's never lupus.
That's true. So it's she is and she's not alone. I gather the provincial health officer in Alberta has also done a tremendous job, and there are others, but Dr. Henry has stood out.
Yes. Yeah, no, I've come around on her delivery. Now I find it peaceful. I did find it hilarious, like Richard Zussman the past 2 days trying to ask about conceiving children, and I'm like, what is going on in Richard and Lisa's household over there, that this is the number one question burning the airwaves?
I will say there has been some grumbling on Twitter, and from some journalists I've talked to, is that they've had a very hard time sort of spreading out the questions.
That's
and
true.
so the people who are asking the questions tend to be big organizations, which I guess is understandable.
Ron, Keith, Richard.
Yeah, but you'll also see like two different people from CBC, and you'll also see a couple people from Global, and so a lot of the sort of regional outlets have been upset because they haven't been able to ask as many or sometimes any sort of direct, more sort of regionally focused questions. I don't know what the answer is. There's no. I have seen some alleging that there's someone playing favorites. It doesn't work like that. It's a queue. Now that ignores the people in the room, but there's fewer and fewer people in the room all the time.
Yeah, they're pulling a camera now, I believe, the networks.
Yeah, they are. They're doing the best they can. It's just I don't, short of somebody going in and looking at the list of people who are lined up by pressing 1 on their phone, I don't know what else they could do.
Yeah. Well, I think I saw this first with Brett Manier from NL Radio in Kamloops. And like Kamloops, big media market, NL Radio, very important, influential newsroom. Yeah. And you're right. And then I sat there and thought, have I heard any NL Radio reporters? And you know that if Harrison and Yakabuchi and Woodford were still there, they'd be getting questions.
You think so? Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. Is that part of it is that Dr. Henry's and certainly Adrian Dix's answers tend to be quite verbose,
expansive.
so that is part of it. Is that fewer questions are being answered than you might think in an hour and a half. Not that they shouldn't go into detail, but I mean that plays into part of it. And some of it is people thinking they can just hit 1 and then get a question in the next 5 minutes, and that just does not work.
No, I was oddly comforted though that Brett Manier was being cranky on Twitter because I feel like that's part of regular real life and everything is going fine. What's Adam? I haven't been listening to Victoria Radio. Is Adam Sterling tearing it up on?
Oh yes. I mean obviously I don't get a chance to listen live every day because I can only listen to so much radio with a 5-year-old running around. But yeah, there's been some frustrations with this will shock you, but Victoria City Council. There are some plans being floated to reopen the idea of tent cities. In
Topaz Park.
Exactly, in Topaz Park.
God.
And so, nothing has happened yet. And I will say this in defense of Victoria City Council, they are literally just throwing ideas at the wall right now. But as Adam Sterling has pointed out, they've lost the benefit of the doubt. And so if it looks like people are going to be very suspicious of anyone who looks like they're pushing a previous agenda, using a crisis to do that. Yes. You're seeing lots of people with hammer and sickles in their Twitter usernames saying it's time to dismantle capitalism because this time it'll work. I think
nice it out of this.
Speaking of, but I think that those are the kinds of people on all sides that people will not look well on now, but certainly afterwards when it was saying, opportunism is going to be kind of the worst sin in retrospect.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good point. I just say we move all these people as close to Ben Ison as possible because that's only fair. So if he has a backyard in his backyard, if he has some sort of co-op collective thing, move him in there. Like whatever. I'm all for that. By the way, I'll give you the opposite of that. Here's a little shout out to our capitalist friends. There's a company, a work camp company, who has already reached out to Fort St. John. And they do a lot of work there. And they said, hey, if you need more hospital space, if you need more housing, let us know. Wow. We will help you get that up and running. They have modular work camps that they can put together pretty quickly. Our community is going to be overwhelmed, we want to step up to the plate. And so companies like that, in a lot of ways, like this anti-capitalism wave, it's sort of hilarious because it's really been employers and companies and businesses who have led the wave in doing the right thing by people, right? Like they were the first ones to shut down offices even before there were orders. They were the ones to, try to send everyone to work from home. They were the ones that are trying to find ways to keep people employed through these rough times. Like I actually think they are, the evil capitalists are actually doing everything they can to try to help. And, it is the more, it is, the Ben Isons of the world that are kind of seem out of touch with what's actually happening on the ground.
Let me give you an example of that. I know somebody who works high up at Starbucks, and they just had a conference call. It was either yesterday or the day before, so I apologize if I'm getting the day wrong. But Starbucks has closed all their stores that don't have a drive-through capacity. They are going to pay all of their employees. as if they worked the scheduled shifts. For people who are on some sort of system where they receive a bonus, including regular employees, their quarterly bonus will be calculated based on January and February performance.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, so it's basically just like we will sort of prorate it, and you'll get the regular amount depending on how you did in January, February. Yes, that's just one example, but there are lots of those out there. And because we tend to report the bad news, and there have been some companies that have not distinguished themselves, but there have been a lot more, I think, that have.
Yeah. I mean, there've been pay increases for the folks stocking shelves at Save-On. I saw a social media picture of Jimmy Pattison in one of these Save-On foods. Talk about a guy who should not be out. 91-year-old Jimmy Pattison, but he's out there. He's inspecting what's going on. When shortages, trying to make sure that the food chain, the supply chain stays active. So, kudos to those folks at hockey teams. Now, I forget which one of the Alberta teams I think has cut their coaches' pay by 25%, and the coaches have voluntarily done that to help pay staff to keep going. So, there are good news stories out there. Can I tell one hilarious thing though from the Global website about an entrepreneur? Should. Okay, we should have some levity. Global BC has a story from one of the wires in the States, and I believe it's an Oregon company. An Oregon strip club was having problems. Obviously, they being forced to social distance. So they have created a food delivery service like DoorDash, where essentially they will bring you, these workers will bring you your lunch, but they will bring it to you topless, and they've named it Boober Eats, which is just an outstanding use of punnery.
That's not bad.
It's pretty good. So if you go to Global BC's website, please search for Boober. It's a safe for work story.
What's the radius on their delivery? Just for a friend.
Yeah, asking for a friend. Yeah. Yes, I'm not sure, but the number 5 orange is probably sitting there going, "Hey, hold up." What a world. This was brought up in our ICBA cafe this morning by one of my coworkers who was just astonished by this ingenuity.
Actually, that's something I wanted to mention before. You mentioned the ICBA cafe. I didn't know about that, but that's actually cool to hear. Jody Vance had a good piece about how, in some ways, we're lucky that this is happening in 2020 when there are easier ways to keep in touch with people. Yesterday, my son is 5. And he's in preschool. And yesterday, he FaceTimed with one of his good preschool friends, and it was literally 45 minutes of them just making silly faces at each other and laughing and laughing. Right? Because I'm funny, but I'm not that funny.
Yeah.
And like you can only, it's the stuff you can only get from your other 5-year-old friends. And had this happened, had he been around 20 years ago, it would have been even more isolating and distant and hard, quite frankly. And so, it's good that people are reaching out and doing that kind of stuff. I've just downloaded an app called Marco Polo that I'm using with my sisters and my parents, where we're literally just recording like little 10-second videos of us telling jokes and saying hi, and saying hi to my nieces and nephews, and like it helps. Everything you can do that will make you not want to go outside helps.
Yeah, no, for sure. The videos of, the 5 of us went to, all the care homes are locked down, thank God. Jenny's dad is in a care home in Abbotsford. And I gotta say, like, one of the worst parts of Dr. Henry's briefings is when she announces another care home has been hit.
Yeah.
And you sit there, like I sit there and I think, please don't be that one, please don't be that one, please don't be that one, please don't be that one. And the awful sense of almost relief when it's not that one, and the guilt that comes with that, because it is someone's loved one that's stuck there. Mm-hmm. So, I know Dix is trying to now keep people from working at multiple sites. Good. Like, we got to do whatever it takes. But, we went out to the parking lot, and they rolled Steve, my father-in-law, to the window. And, we were waving to him and going crazy and, pumped on, he loves Billy Joel, pumped on Keeping the Faith, a little, parking lot dance party. He's giving us the thumbs up. He's nonverbal. He's giving us the thumbs up. And, it's just like, that's the kind of thing that, years from now, we will remember from this, I think. Like, remember that time we went and saw Dad and played Keeping the Faith? And
that's amazing.
It's hard. It's hard. And, Facebook Messenger has an app for kids, and my son has discovered that, and so he's talking to his hockey buddies, and I'm not sure how deep these conversations are, but it's okay. Just them seeing each other makes them feel better. And someday, Dr. Bonnie says it. This is temporary. Someday we will go back to being normal. But, I know we're at 30 minutes. We should probably wrap it up. But every year ICBA does a big gala. Ours is, usually in November. And we get a big NFL player. We've had Peyton Manning and Brett Favre and Troy Aikman. We're kicking tires on a couple for this year before all this broke. The Jewish Community Center does a similar banquet in March or the Cultural Center as a big fundraiser. They had Drew Brees this year.
Oh, cool.
And they had it March 11th. And now someone in that room has been diagnosed and most likely carried there. And so that's 700 people or so who are at risk. And it's making us rethink stuff, right? Like, will we be able to have a gathering of, we usually have 1,000 people in that room. You were there last year. You usually have 1,000 people in that room. Is that possible? Is that appropriate?
And even if it's deemed safe, will people be ready?
Yeah.
For that,
Will construction be able to, so you'd almost have to, the way this economy is going, you almost have to have a year without sponsors, because I'm not sure who's going to have sponsorship dollars to step up, right? So these are the questions. More earlier than that, we have a golf tournament in July. 31 years we've had this golf tournament, and now we're like, okay, we can do it without sponsors and kind of break even, but could we get 144 golfers in July? I don't know. So these are the things that we're working through, and I imagine every workplace is, and it's not great. That's my wife returning here to the, for those of you watching on video, returning to the, look at that, her first cameo on BC Poly Hot Stove. That's all right.
That's okay.
It's her office. I'm just interloping, so.
You will always be an interloper.
Yes, absolutely. All right, that's all I got. ICBA.ca/coronavirus if you're a construction company or small business. There's good stuff there.
And the orca.ca/ I think it's COVID-19 for our COVID-19 blog. If I've gotten the URL wrong, it's on the main site, and there's an easy and obvious link on the top.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for watching, and we will see you all next week.